Hello and welcome to our weekly Integral Love Relationship Web Jam. My name is Martin Utschig and I'm the author of Integral Relationships, a Manual for Men, and my new book, Sex, Purpose, Love, Couples in Integral Relationships Creating a Better World. And the purpose of our weekly Web Jam is to further the integral relationship vision. And today I'm totally thrilled and excited to be with such a couple, an integral couple who makes the world a better place, Leanna Gregory and Jim Cruzen. Welcome to the show, to the Web Jam.
Thank you for having us.
Indeed. Glad to be here.
So if you join us live this morning or this evening, I'm in Turkey, so for me it's evening. We invite you to participate by typing in your name and where you join us from and your questions at the bottom right of your screen. And if you are single and looking for a partner, you may also share your integralsingles.com screen name or your Facebook profile name. And there is also a little hand symbol on the top right of the screen, which you can touch if you want to join us live. And once I accept your request, a small plugin will be downloaded and the test of your camera and microphone will run before you can come online. And this works best in Google Chrome. And please know that this web jam is recorded and you give your permission to be included in the replay if you come on live. Hi, Deborah in Boulder. So I'm going to introduce our guest couple. Jim is a coach, thinker, and dancer. And I want to say dancer extraordinaire. If you want to see some videos, I think, on your Facebook page, it's quite impressive. And a seeker and natural-born teacher. His passion for language, body awareness, spirituality, and relationships fuel his contribution in the world. He is the creator of the Power Without Apology roadmap. I'm very curious about that. A system and community that helps good men relate in leadership and lead in relationship. And Leanna is a bubbly, grounded, and full of life person born in Munich, Germany, and has a natural directness that pairs with her brightness to make her an incredible coach and teacher. And her company, Doggy Dialogue, is a unique and integral approach to dog training. And in this company, in this work, she helps families achieve the freedom and relationship they want with their dogs. Mm-hmm. So welcome again.
Thank you.
And as I was reading your bio, I went like, I have two phobias, and they're both somewhat gone. One is dogs, and the other one is dancing.
So you're terrified right now. This is great.
I'm inspired that at my age, you maybe can help me with both of my phobias. And I've overcome them somewhat, but here in Istanbul, there's dogs just laying on the street and it's very peaceful. So that doesn't trigger me. But 15 years ago, I probably wouldn't have gone on the street, without pepper spray. So now I'm better. And dancing, I recently took some dance lessons and I look like a stick man, walking around. So I'm very, very impressed by your professional work that you do. But of course, even more so curious about our topic today, because dancing has to do a lot with leadership and following. Mm-hmm. And with dogs, I guess it's a little bit like that too, right? In a way.
Yeah, very much.
I'd say it's quite often that we come home and are talking about our day or some of our sessions or just talking about, and we'll be in the sudden awareness that we're teaching the same thing in two different contexts, like when it comes to structure and flow and communication versus connection. And I think for both of us, at least my experience is that it's going back and reclaiming the structure, reclaiming the capacity to not dominate, but retake mm-hmm. that power dynamic and use it for love and setting up communication. So it's mm-hmm. often we're like, oh, I taught the same thing to dogs. I'm like, yep, I taught it to couples today. And so it's very much alike.
Uh-huh. Do you feel it's easier teaching it to dogs or to couples?
Well, when I work with dogs, I also work with their owners. Therefore, it becomes a little bit more complex as just teaching it to the dog. But I do think that couples are another step of complexity.
I don't know. For me,
well.
couples is much easier than dogs. So I think we're both in our zone of genius.
Yeah. And so I'm curious how you met and what the attraction was. And also you're both integrally informed, and Jim, you read my books. And so how did, there are three questions, how did all of that inform your relationship?
Who wants to tell the story?
Which side of the story will we hear?
Well, we met dancing. So my background is also partner dance. So we were out at the same night and started dancing together, and it just kind of fit. It fit on the dance floor, it fit off the dance floor, and we were both very surprised about it because we were both not looking for anything. So yeah, that's how we met, and then we just could not stay away from each other.
How long ago did you meet?
Almost 5 years ago.
Wow, okay. So you made it past the initial romance phase and things like that, and went into the commitment phase of the relationship.
Indeed, yeah.
And we still like each other.
We still more than like each other, which is really great too.
And you're still romantic with each other. I'm just talking more about the hormones.
Exactly. Yes, the initial hormone spike. We rode that wave and still dancing it out. Yeah, I would say for me, my experience of our connection, obviously the dance floor, you experience a lot of different styles of connection, and it's very common to have a great connection with another dancer. And with us, there's that love is metaphysical gravity expression, and there was just such a strong attraction to Leanna that I couldn't explain on levels that I hadn't really experienced before. I mean, the physical, the emotional, like the mental was all like there, but there was a deep kind of soul attraction there that was new for me to experience with her. And yeah, for me, it meant actually getting out of a current relationship I was in at the time and creating space in my life to actually open it up at all, because the attraction was so strong that I knew I wasn't going to be able to play in it without being a full yes and opening everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And so today our topic is leadership in relationships. And so what comes to mind initially for me is that I grew up in a very traditional environment, in a way where at least in my parents' relationship, my father was clearly the leader and my mother was following. And so contrary to that, actually, my grandparents, who were also a role model, they were more like equals, but they had their separate domains where they were leading, and my grandmother was more in the kitchen and my grandfather was a butcher. And so it seemed like they had their territories worked out. And I'm so like, I'm very driven by my purpose and my passion. And so for me, a difficulty, and hopefully I learn a lot today, is in relationship that I'm very driven in living my purpose and my passion, which also puts me sort of naturally in a leadership role. And then when I pursue a relationship, even though I want to have that as an equal partnership, it's often very difficult. I experience that as difficult in integrating my partner in a leadership role as well. So what are your thoughts around that and your experiences?
Well, the way I experience leadership in our relationship is, first and foremost, we are leading ourselves. So I'm responsible for leading myself and he's responsible for leading himself. And then once that is established, then we can talk about what it looks like in the relationship. And we're very good at just kind of going wherever we need to go in the moment. So, I can lead, he can take a step back, and the other way around. So I experience it as whatever is best in the moment, like the highest good. That's what we decide on. So it doesn't matter whether like I'm for it or not. It's like that the higher thing that makes the decision, right? It's not me or him. But because we are leading ourselves first and foremost, we still made that choice in the first place. We made the choice to follow the bigger purpose.
Yeah. I would add to that, like in our instance, at least my experience of it, our transcendental purpose, or the thing that really comes about when we're together, we didn't know until a good ways into the relationship. So though it's a factor now, and it's like, I think, a really powerful factor, that shared sense of what we do in the world, we discovered together in the relationship. So my take on it would be, for me, when I get to kind of that transcendental purpose or shared purpose, that really upper echelon of what's guiding the principle of creation, I'm in more of a surrender state to that. Like, I don't feel like I can control that. I may know it better at times than others and have a sense of it, but I love letting that unfold through us in our relationship. So for me, there's more of a, instead of like, this is my purpose and I'm going to go about finding someone and structuring this and like taking a masculine approach to structuring my way there, A to B, it came about more organically for us. It was like we were living together and relating and loving kind of how we overlapped as a couple and what we experienced. And then it was kind of this like, oh my goodness, we both do the same work and we're both totally like interested in integral relationships and conscious development and helping people and really family or relational dynamics. And a big piece of that is communication and the polarity versus relating and leadership theme. We're like, oh wow, look at that. We happen to do the same work in the world. How great is that? That our circle of friends and our relationship all push that forward. So it was kind of a really lucky accident, which I think is the best part of like soul or anything transcendental, is it's a lucky accident.
And so did you write it down, so like a vision mission statement, or did it organically just between the two of you emerge, and now you have sort of like a North Star, which, because you were all talking about something higher above your head, so to speak, right? A guiding principle, or a, because when you lead and make choices, that they're usually based in moving somewhere, right? Or
Well, I think for us, so we didn't make a mission statement, but we constantly talk about it, and for me anyway, it's really a felt sense, and I'm constantly expressing that, and because for me, if I wrote a mission statement, that would be very unmotivating. Like it wouldn't work for me. So for me, it's really just the interaction of constantly being in communication about what's happening, where are we going. So it's kind of a daily thing, and it's not just something that we put on the wall and then not really talk about anymore.
And I would say that's a function of some of our typologies. My experience is that we both have relatively balanced masculine, feminine essences, or at least have integrated both of those energies pretty fully. And Leanna leads very much in fun and the creative process. So like even in our relating and relational development, for us, it's about finding a fun way to do that. It's about games and play and the experiential and kind of surrendering to it. So if I sat down and said, we're going to do a 3-page questionnaire, and we're going to figure out like what this is, and then let's like work together. Like I remember at one point we have a lot of coaching friends, and it was like, oh, a really effective like relational tool is to do a weekly meeting. Just set aside 30 minutes to an hour, and you go through all of like what's working, what's not working. And even just bringing that to the table is like, hey, this is something we could consider. Was like, oh no, like everything, all the energy in Leanna dropped out, and it was like, there's no way I'm relating to you if you make me do this thing. I am not a corporation, and we are not a corporation. So it's finding fun ways for us to get the same process and the same result that works for us. Yeah. So we didn't think about it; it kind of just happens.
Yeah. But when you say, Leanna, you said earlier, so like oriented towards the highest good. It's of course, what is the highest good? Right? How do you determine that?
Well, I think,
and then specifically, if you might disagree about what is the highest good.
I think different people have different opinions about what the higher guide is. Some people call it God, some people call it the universe, some people call it the divine. So for me, the definition itself is not that important, but it is that spiritual connection. That's what I would call it. It's just have a spiritual knowing, basically. That's what it's like for me.
Absolutely. And I think we both, to kind of carry over the original concept, make that effort on our own to stay connected to source or God or our own really transcendental purpose, our own sense of who we are and why we're here and what we're meant to do in the world, and keeping each other up to date as that shifts, or if there's a change in that. Like I would say we very organically share that inner process with each other, and have support systems and like things that we do that help us reach those states to stay connected to the truth of why we're here and who we are. And it's just sharing that. And that's for us a very fun, natural process. It's kind of what we do around the house when we're cooking or playing or talking, is to have those conversations. So it's not really set apart as this thing we have to figure out. It's this thing that we both know is unfolding, and we're keeping each other in the conversation. That's my experience of it. And it's fun when all of a sudden it changes, because, okay, now what do we do with that? You know? Yeah.
When what changes?
Like when one of us gets a felt sense of a new direction or a new piece of information that's in the mix. And I'll pull the analogy in just because I think it works really well in the dance realm. For me, and I think for us, the purpose, that transcendental purpose for me is analogous to the music and the way that we dance together. And my experience of partner dance at higher levels is if you're both tapped into and really listening to the music, figuring out what improvisation or what step or what's going to happen in the space of that is pretty effortless. If you're both really listening to the music, my experience is when you start to focus on like the technicalities of how it's going to happen without focusing on the music, you start stepping on each other's toes, and like the creative process is, oh, I was going to say something, but then you did. And oops, we're starting to talk over each other. So for me, it's going back to listening to the music and then opening up space for unknowing and uncertainty. This is what I hear. We're on different pages. Where I am, where you are, and where we're going as a couple are all a little bit not on the same page. So let's just hold that uncertainty and really open back up and listen to the music and feel what's coming through this. What's, like you said, the highest good. Yeah.
And so in that way, so what really stuck with me was that you said you first need to come sort of like into your own purpose and into your own leadership, Leanna, right? That was like a opening for you. And that, of course, for some people, makes them so driven, they often cannot even imagine then how they can co-create with someone, if they're in their own leadership and don't want someone who just simply follows them. And so that the guiding principle around that, going in circles now, I guess, is this higher, what you call transcendental purpose, and you call the higher good, Leanna, right, that you have. So when people are not really clear about such a guiding principle, right, so that they're living kind of like their day-to-day life and do their job and are not inspired, what would be your advice and your help for people?
I mean,
who don't have for themselves that guiding principle or not in their relationship?
In the way I see it, I think there's always a guiding principle. It just can occur at different levels. So if the relationship, to use some of like your terminology, because I'm super grateful for both of your books. For me, that integral framework overlaid on relationship really gave me words for a lot of things that I didn't have. So if it's a little bit more of a transactional love relationship where one of the guiding principles of why we're together is I get something from you that I don't have access to, and you get something from me that I don't have access to, then it may be just getting back into that and getting clear with that. It's more the individual, the development of the individual, and what's really at play here in that process. And it could be just getting in touch with that and being truthful or really present to what wants to emerge from that. If the couple, I think, has moved their way through a lot of those transactional love foundational agreements, and they're starting to get to more fully developed sense of self, then I think it opens up to more, well, how are we in community? Why are we here? Like, what am I meant to do? I love our love relationship, and how does that support kind of a data second tier? How do I bring that to community? And then the community piece might be what directs it without a strong sense of this is my soul's purpose in the world on a really high echelon. And I think a process of getting there to the point where you know why you come to relationship, you know how that relationship really supports your personal integration and development. And then, I don't know, for me, the sense of like touching the divine or the soul really speaking to me and saying, this is what you're here in the world to do, was a long process of clearing space in my life and opening up to that. And until it came through there, I was in the waiting. I didn't know exactly why I was here. And love relationships serve those first two purposes. And I just feel very blessed now to be in a love relationship with that information. And a felt sense of like, oh, we can both go to that to inform what our relationship is becoming. It's a really fun place for me.
And to get back to what if you don't have that guidance? I think everyone has that within themselves, and like you said, for everyone that expresses a little bit differently. So for me, the way I make decisions is about fun. So does it feel fun and light and like I just want to go out and do it? That's my driving factor, right? That might be different for someone else. Someone else, you're a little bit different.
Yeah.
How do you make those decisions?
Mine is a little bit more of just the getting really, for me, it's getting in my body. The embodiment piece is a big one. So getting clear and open in my body, and then that meditative process of really dropping into something much larger than myself and opening to what is in that space. And often for me, that comes through as like a statement or a very strong felt sense of what's next or what's true. So it's more of the masculine go-to stillness and death and opening. And then yours is like what lights us up. So it's a fun for us to kind of find what are those two things? Like, how do I take my felt sense of this is the connection point? And then we're like, cool. How do we do that in a world, a way that lights us up and we get to play? Yeah.
So you've been referring a little bit to transcendental love relationships and things. So I just want to real quick bring up a PowerPoint. And sorry, I have to slide through a little bit. I don't know why I didn't go to the slide that I wanted to show. So this is all about purpose finding and a bunch of books that do this. And
this is like the speed learning session.
Speed learning session, yeah. Almost there. So in traditional relationships, so in traditional relationships and even in modern relationships, if we follow the work of Alison Armstrong, for example, right? She in her books she basically says that men want sex and want to be cared for and want to get wisdom from their partner, and women traditionally want to be provided for and be with successful men and be protected and want a protector and a powerful man and a creative man. And when I looked at that, I saw that these 6 different attractor, they map onto the first 6 chakras. So the providing survival, sexuality, power, care, creativity, and wisdom. If we go back here, you see providing success, power, sex, care, wisdom. And so then I realized that a lot of relationships are based on this transactional desire, of a man want a sexy woman, a woman want a man who's a good provider, a woman want a man who's powerful, a man want a woman who has a big heart and comforts him, a woman wants a man who's creative, and a man wants a woman who gives him feedback and is wise. And then these transactional relationships, then it's not that the man holds all the power or the woman holds all the power, but it depends on which chakra we look at, where the person in the partnership holds the power in a traditional relationship. The woman holding the sexual power, the man often in traditional relationships holding the financial power, and then the status power, and you get the idea, right? So there's this exchange. And so then leading and following, if it even takes place in these relationships, then is not on an equal level, but distributed among the chakras. And so it looks like this.
Right.
And then in the transcendental love relationship that you refer to and what you're living, I assume, is that you both can lead and follow at a level of each chakra. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, that for me, that's a very big thing to claim personally, but definitely a beautiful goal that I think we strive towards. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so you intuitively, I sense, did that before I wrote the book and put out the nice graphics. Right. So we have the transcendental love.
Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful frame to look through, and really does a lot of good for making sense of where we're at with love and relationship and leadership and power at this particular moment in history and time. I think it's a really powerful roadmap of sorts.
Yeah. And then in this image here for the indical people, we see that each chakra manifests in all 4 quadrants, and with the feminine and masculine polarities of ascending, descending, agency, and communion. So just that we have a little framework as we move forward with our conversation here.
I love that.
So that was sort of like my first question that I put in the email: how can we lead and co-create in all 4 quadrants along the 7 chakras without dominating our partner?
Right. That was the big one. When I read that, I was like, if we can manage that, we'll have accomplished quite a bit in the hour.
Yeah. Can you reflect a little bit more on how that works in your relationship, if you go, from the material providing to sexual to
up and through all the different chakras. My experience is that the masculine chakral power and care, or power providing, and then the creativity, that those tend to occur more from a masculine perspective of driving outcomes, acting more from myself and agency, and that the feminine power centers tend to lead from surrendering to what's occurring through them, more of a following perspective in leadership, the creative process itself. And so for me, that in dance and relationship in the whole game is the fundamental crux. Is, I think, from my experience of a lot of Western culture, is that the only really validated form of power is the masculine one of agency and driving outcomes from self, so matter to spirit. And for me, I experienced that in partner dancing, particularly the jazzy improvisational form of it that I did. I realized, wow, there's another way to be powerful or to lead, which is actually to hold uncertainty, to wait, to listen, to let something come into the space that I am leading, I'm creating, but I'm creating by creating space. It's a different way to get to the outcome. And so that's part of why I really want to facilitate a shift in conversation from just masculine, feminine to like leadership. And I play with the idea of fellowship. It's very cliche or clever, but that idea that there is some skill, there is some leadership in listening, in surrendering, in being still and letting something come into the space. And that's something I think that both of us are open to, is surrendering to both styles of leadership. it might be taking charge and driving the outcome from any one of those chakra centers, or it could be inviting the other person to listen to what's coming through and what they may have access to. So I might surrender to Leanna's feminine leadership of, I have a felt sense of what's happening here, and instead of trying to drive the outcome, I'll bring that information into the field and hear what she has to say and allow that perhaps to lead us. Does that give some insight? Is that at all helpful?
Yeah, that actually, I find that very helpful.
Okay.
And how do you experience that then, Leanna, when the masculine is not sort of like really leading, but only creating a space for you to move in? You know, because some women may say, well, you know, I want a man who knows what he wants and not just open the space for me then to kind of like move in and have to help him to make a decision or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I experience that as I feel very seen when he does that, when he asks me for my opinion, or he asks me what I feel is appropriate in that moment. And for me, being seen, once I feel seen, I can open up to really anything. Then even if he ends up making a decision that I wasn't voicing that part, then I'm like, okay, it's fine because you saw me, you heard me, and you know, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a second part of your question. Do you remember what else you asked me? There's something
No.
else I wanted to say. I'll come back to it.
Yeah. Again, for me, the question was if you know, I just stereotype a little bit, you know, that the difficulty is often that I experience that women want men who lead, but also are intuitively attuned with a woman that they lead in the direction the woman wants to go. Right?
I remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Well done. Go team.
So for me, I actually voice it to him when I'm unable to make a decision. When I need him to just take charge, I tell him, I need you to make a decision. So when he asks me, what do you want for dinner? Instead of saying, I don't know, maybe this, maybe that, and I'm really not capable of making a decision, I say, I can't make a decision right now, please do that. And that's when he steps up and he just goes for it. And then it doesn't matter what he picks because I ask him to choose for me, because in that moment that was just not something I wanted to do or I was able to do in the moment. So I think that part of the communication again is just super important, because for women I know a lot of times we just expect the men to read our mind. So we say one thing and then we mean something else and then we're upset that why couldn't you read my mind? So I think for us women, it's really, really important to actually speak out loud what we need. So that because Jim, he always wants to make sure that I feel taken care of. And I can only do that when he actually knows how to address those things.
Yeah. And I think that the game plays out on different levels. What you spoke to a bit, like in the access points so the ways in which Leanna shows up is she has a lot of development and a lot of energetic awareness, and she's very sensitive to a lot of things. So that for me, that calls me forth to be in my masculine energy even more. Like it's a much smaller tightrope that I'm walking at this point, which means I'm going to fall sometimes because she can sense a subtle energetic shift that may not even be present in an action or a word. It's just a shift inside of my energy system. So it's an ongoing process and it's a learning process. And for me, one of the things I experience with us is because we tend to be more balanced, we're okay with a good portion of the time, the polarity not being really extreme. Like there may not be a really extreme charge in our common space all the time, or even 80% of the time. And for us, I will speak for myself, that's okay. We're okay with that. If the outcome of the moment isn't to create that charge, then we're okay with a slightly less charged moment and being in kind of a flex and flow together. And I think for me, it's the mastery of being able to say, what's the outcome of this moment? If it's intimacy and connection, or if the business needs these decisions to be made in order for our purpose to come through, then me showing up in more of a holding space and less charged like field is not in the highest good. So it's me then accessing those 3 chakra centers and that masculine energy and standing in more decisiveness and saying, this is the most effective way to show up to this moment to lead us to our outcomes. And with Leanna, again, it's all specific to her typologies. Some of the things that are very important to her are being seen and being heard. So for me, playing the masculine edge needs to include her feeling seen and heard as I drive it. So that's a little bit more of a nuanced game than, hey, 6 o'clock, you don't know where we're going, too bad. Like, you're going to love it. I've made this decision for us, and here we go. That may very well shut her energy completely down just because of who she is and who I am. So I think everybody's game or that dance can be a very nuanced one, and getting to know your partner very specifically and yourself is how you dance that dance.
Yeah. So Dan wrote, and people who watch this on YouTube, they don't see the site, the messages that people share. So I'm loving the leadership, followership, dynamic and or dialectic. Personally, when I was a modern dancer, I could do solo improvisation, but I was terrible at couples dance because I didn't really listen to the music and or my partner. Wonderful discussion. My wife and I have been married for 48 years. So we're not new at this, but it remains a sticking point. So, and since I'm a terrible dancer, you know, this, I'm just trying to imagine this, you know, that I'm asked to lead in the dance, but you say as a professional dancer, you also feel into, so like the energy of Leanna's body, and maybe does she give you some guidance before you?
I would say,
how does that physically feel? You know?
Yeah, this is one of those moments I wish I had a slide that I could share, because one of the things that I did with your framework was recognize that I could overlay it over in the partner dance world, the development of complexity and the relation of lead to follow. So the improvised partner dances are very different than pattern dancing partner dances. So pattern dancing partner dances, the purpose of them is to do the step that's preset in the most perfect way. So both of you know the pattern. It's just a matter of showing up in the right energy. So the follows role is very much staying present, staying balanced, waiting and listening, and doing her side. And the leader's side is completely like certainty, knowing what's happened, executing, being like a lot of conviction in how they move through it, so that the follow can relax into that. And so for me, that lines up very well with kind of the blue to orange range. We do it right so that we fit in. We want to be the best version of ourselves. The roles are kind of teased out. There's not a lot of feedback from the follow or autonomy on the follow's part. Her job is to fill the frame, look beautiful, emanate her energy, and listen and do exactly what the leader says. And I think that lines up with a lot of earlier stage relationships. Like, we both have our separate roles, we show up in them, we know the right way to do it. If we do it right, everybody around us thinks we're amazing and we feel like our best selves, and we get lots of props for it and we feel good. You know, we have the car and all the right things. Relationally and on the dance floor, that all changes when the follow gets to creatively contribute to the process. And in dance, that often means she starts to embellish. So she gets, like, the leader then senses when she has an embellishment to add and does a little less structurally, so he doesn't drive as much. And now we start to listen and leave space for her to add, which means she needs to be connected to the music, and he needs to be attuned to her enough to back off of the structural drive and support space for her to do her thing. And then oftentimes that will shift back to him driving again. And so that for me is where the polarity, masculine, feminine, or the speaking and listening piece, you know, if your woman has a strong sense of who she is in the world and she's living that, then there may be a moment where just driving your household to the outcomes you know are your masculine drive may not be the way to hold your woman to the fullness of what she's becoming. So how do you back off of some of that and hold space and listen to what's coming through for her, and then play that into the unit as a whole? So that's some of the framework that I felt in my body dancing, and I loved. That was for me always the thing, was I absolutely love that space of unknown. What's going to come through us creatively together? I always hated, like, tell me the steps, and I don't want to do it, so I'll do it like everybody else. That seems boring. I was super green. I was like, I want to know what's it like. Let's do this together. Everybody's equal.
Yeah. So you can even attribute certain dance styles to levels of consciousness, right?
Absolutely. And the why do you dance always tended to be the like insightful way there. Like, what's the purpose of partner dancing? Is it to dance to fit in? Is it to dance to be the best version of yourself? Is it to dance to feel part of the community as a whole and feel that vibe? Or is it to be the fullest expression of who you are in relation to others, with all of those things being true, which is much more obviously integral. Yeah.
What came up for you, Leanna, when you listened to this?
Well, the way I experience dance with him is I feel an invitation. So instead of him just forcing the structure on me, it's like, oh, how about we go over here? And then I can take him up on the invitation and go into that and then embellish, or I say, no, you know what, let's go over here. And then he follows and does where I want to go. So I think the rigidness of the lead sometimes can really overpower the feminine or the masculine, depending on how you look at it. So I think that the invitation part is very important. So, you know, the suggestion, like, you know, how about we go over here? And it's like, okay, yeah, let's do that. That sounds really fun. Or let's go over there. And Jim is like, hey, cool.
One piece of this that I've noticed in the work is the embodiment piece. And I think that my experience is that oftentimes when men are exploring that integration of the feminine, like starting to go and explore that and saying, maybe I don't have to just muscle her around the floor all the time. Maybe I'll listen and I'll be more present in the emotional space. What I've seen in the men I work with is that oftentimes there's a moving out of the body and up into the heart space. So they're not as present in their lower chakras. They give away that sex and that power in order to move into the heart space. And I think that oftentimes that's the contraction that women or the feminine have. Is like, great, you're now suggesting, but I can't feel you grounded to the earth. I can't feel you in your pelvis. Like, it's great that you have heart space for me, but I don't want to step into that anymore because I can't feel you as a human. I can't feel your own conviction, your own connectedness. And so for me, that's, I think, part of how this integrates is, how do you bring into the heart space? How do you bring into some of the surrender? And like, I'll suggest and let you know, like, if I'll support you if you go, and I'll support you if you don't. But regardless, I'm really rooted. I'm really grounded. I still have a clear sense of who I am and how I dance and what's happening here. I'm not just handing you the whole thing. I'm handing you this little basket to play in, and what do you want to do with it?
Okay. Yeah, so that was one of the questions. How do you do that without losing yourself in the relationship? And is it right that I get the sense you both stay grounded while you do this literal dance of leading and following? And would that be true for you too, that groundedness, or is that a different experience for you?
No, definitely being grounded is extremely important. Especially because in our society, the head gets valued so much. So everything that, you know, happens in the mind gets valued very highly. So for us, it's important to come back into the body, and that means being present in different chakras, and not just in the chakra up here. And one really fun way that I like to play, how I like to play with that, is when I do it with my clients. So when I notice I'm just going into their head and just having a really hard time actually functioning and doing what I ask them to do because they're overthinking everything, is just have them stand there and wiggle their toes. Because what happens is when you wiggle your toes, you bypass the head and you go straight into the ground and get back into your body. And now all of a sudden you have a very different access to the person you're engaging with. And so that's definitely something I play with in dog training and with the owners, and you play with that with your couples.
Absolutely.
And I mean, dogs very much, or animals in general, respond to how present you are. And the presence comes by being fully present in your body. As soon as you move out of your body, animals will no longer respond to you. And I experience the same thing as in humans as well.
Leanna will completely check out if I check out of my body. So like if we're in conversation or there's an energy running or we're holding a conversation, I can sense immediately she'll just kind of pull away from me as soon as I begin to check out. And so it's a continual feedback loop for me. Oh, an invitation back into my body, or she's retracted from the connection.
So I'm just going to read a few more comments here. Deborah said, also appreciate tuning into what each moment requires versus trying to have 24/7 polarization. Eric shares such a good point about men moving into their hearts and losing the connectedness to earth and the chthonic is as ancient masculine. It's a word I'm not familiar with. Amelia was on one of our previous web jams with her partner, Eric. Love to you, Martin, and love witnessing couples doing deep work with each other in the world, as Amelia and Eric do. Dan shares, it occurs to me as you compare the body, heart, and I persistently come from mind that both physically and spiritually heart is the connection point between body and mind. I also relate to checking out if my man checks out of his body, says Amelia, and our friend Eloy said, what non-physical ways can you dance? My wife has vertigo. What non-physical ways can you dance? My wife has vertigo.
I love that. Hello to Eloy.
Eloy has a question.
What non-physical ways can you dance? I know. I mean, I'll tell our little. So when we first started dancing together, we had an amazing physical connection, and obviously we're both professional dancers, so we could dance well together. It was very fun. And as we started just exploring the romantic connection and so forth, we would go listen to music. And I remember an instance where we were like in the back of the club, kind of a bar, jazz bar, and I think I was leaning up against the wall or on a chair or something, and she kind of just nestled in between my legs and in front of me. And it was really just an embrace that we held. I don't know, maybe my arms were around her or something, but we were more or less in stillness, and there was an immediate energetic that set itself up, like an energy that was running between our bodies, and a very, very subtle movement maybe that accompanied that, but really just kind of a spinal little movement, but nothing that anyone from outside would have even been able to know was occurring. And it was very magical. Neither of us was initiating. It was just a really amazing hug that evolved into a little energetic dance. And at the end of it, both of us were like, that's the most incredible dance I may have ever had. And I remember saying to her, like, wow, you are the most incredible leader on that. She's like, are you kidding me? I didn't lead. You led that. That was not me. And so it was kind of that moment where like, oh, okay, that's subtle energetic dancing. That's more of the heart, the soul. That was beyond just the physical bodies. They came to stillness, and all of the rest of that was still possible. And that was a really magical moment for us, just to witness that our dance was occurring on more than just the physical level, and to kind of feel that.
And I think that's a perfect example also of that neither of us were leading, right? There was something else that was happening that we had no control over, but we also didn't fight it. We just kind of went with the flow.
You surrender to it.
We surrendered to it, and it was the most beautiful thing you can ever feel. And I think it was because we both were able to just kind of surrender and let go and just fully be in the moment. And dance really doesn't happen in your feet, right? It's not about the steps. It's not about how graceful you look. It's about the dance with each other. How well can you connect to your partner? And that can happen with a hug, like a really nice embrace, and then just stay there for a little bit, and then move away when it feels like it's time to move away, and then you come back in, and then you play a little bit with what if I swayed you, That can happen when you're standing up, that can happen when you're sitting down, that can happen right here on the couch. It really doesn't matter. It's just about being open to merge a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, Eric shares yes to dancing at multiple levels. So Bert Parley turned me onto something called, and he was a guest on the show a few weeks ago, about polarity management, which I hadn't really heard before. And so it came up again when we prepared for this conversation, Jim, with you, and you mentioned this from polarity to wholarity. And that was, again, a new concept. Pardon?
I said again, and of course, a little bit clever. But
my next source was about moving from wholarity to hilarity. So
if you're gonna play in the game of relating whole from wholarity, you better be ready for some hilarity. I think that's definitely the case. That's it's very much in line with everything we've talked about, but that's how I see this relational dynamic once you cross the threshold into integral. Like once you really have done some of that reclaiming of your parts and integrating those various energy centers and ways of being, then for me, the relational dynamic, the lead follow, the power dynamic is what we're describing here, is so much less linear and so much more quantum, or so much more just in the unknowing. And that's only really, for me, a possibility if both parties have at least done the foundational work to cross that threshold. And I want to be really careful, because I don't want anyone to think that I at least am under the guise of thinking that like I'm there. For me, it's tiny tastes of what that is, and the continual process of going back and cleaning that up and claiming different parts of myself so that I can show up in that wholarity more and more. But even the smallest tastes are such a motivator to that process for me.
What do you add to that, Leanna?
I have nothing to add.
You have nothing to add. Okay. So there's this difference in unity, right? And one of the guests gave that example of an orchestra where people play different instruments, and together there is the unity of the orchestra. And I think that comes back to the earlier question, because some people move into some kind of wholeness in a way, but the differentiation then gets lost, right? And polarity is, of course, important for any kind of co-creation.
So I love, one of the things that dancing a jazz dance did for me was turn me on to jazz theory. And I'm not in any way a musician, but dancing was my form of expression. And I always loved the difference between an orchestra and a jazz band in the way that they created what they created. And I think that from my perspective, that is part of this whole wholarity or working from unity is, are you playing charts? Is it a preset dance or creation or relationship or whatever? Is it preset life that you're just living out where you know the notes? Or are you living it from the space of unknowing? You've played the head arrangement, you know the melody, you all played that together, and now you're taking turns creatively supporting each other and feeling what's coming into the moment? which requires both commitment and drive and knowing and skills and all of that, and then the surrendering of all of that skill set to the unknown moment and whatever's going to come out of it. And for me, that's how I experience life. It feels a lot more like a jazz jam with people I've never met before, and it does like being a part of the Vienna Orchestra and knowing that we've done this together hundreds and thousands of times. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that analogy, even differentiating different types of music creation, playing from scores, being very structured, or jazz and then free jazz, and going.
Right.
Yeah. So I get, for Martin's edification, chthonic, of course I don't know how to pronounce the word, kind of means earthy. That was a word. So it's chthonic. And Eric says yes to continuous experimentation. So in the introduction, Jim, I mentioned that you developed a model, which I don't have in front of me right now. Can you say a little bit more about that?
This is the
roadmap that you teach.
Power Without Apology. Yeah.
Yeah, Power Without Apology.
Yeah, it's a brand, like a full rebranding for me, and doing all the same stuff is the truth of it. But I'm really shifting my messaging from divine union and couples to the focus on the men, which is me embracing my own story and my own path more fully, and inviting others to the process that I've been on and continue to be on. My felt sense is that most men have been given a choice from a young age of power as aggression or love and connection as safety from that. And for myself, as a big-hearted, empathetic young boy, there was no way power as aggression was a model I could go for. So I leaned into what was comfortable for me, which turned me very much into one of the classic Mr. Nice Guys who was tended to appease and look for connection by making other people like me and becoming whatever they needed me to be. And that led me into relationships that were very unfulfilling and a lot of pain. And it's been about a 10-year process of personal development and growth, and really, in this instance, taking the dance and going, I know this stuff from the dance floor. How do I live this in a different way in my life? And so Power Without Apology is showing these men the improvisational partnership that we're talking about here, a different way to be in your power and not give away your heart, to show up with certainty in your relationship at work and home, but also hold attunement and presence with the people you're leading, because you value them as a follow, and the fact that their voice is important, but their voice doesn't define who you are. And so it's that process of how do we take our power back? How do we get grounded, get earthy, get in who we are and live that in the world, in our homes and at work, but still keep the heart. We don't have to choose between the macho guy and the wussy, snag. You have a third way. So it's the embodiment process and a brotherhood of men that are going through that together. Yeah.
And you said good men.
Good men. Because it's the nice guys. I mean, it's the guys. It's the guys who have heard, women just want a guy who's connected to his emotions and knows God. And they went that route. They were like, great, that's so cool. I'm going to get my woman that way. And either they're still chasing her because she's like, great, you're connected to God, but I don't know who you are. And so I don't respect you as a man. Or they got her and now they're worried because she's starting to experience the parts of him that aren't fully rooted, that aren't in his knowing and in his power. And he's afraid he's going to lose her because of that. So that's really the tribe. That's what's coming through right now. And a lot of that will be launching in the next weeks or two, so people can find it in time. But I'm very excited to be playing in that and bringing that to the world.
And now we talked a lot about dancing. Or what did you want to share, Leanna?
I was just going to say, it's so important, I think, that the men get to be empowered now, because for so many years now, the feminism really had a big push, and women were able to feel empowered and do their own thing and know they don't need a man in their life in order to function well. And I think now it's time for the men to also be empowered, because along the way throughout the feminism, we forgot about the men, how important it is for them to also feel like they can do it on their own. And so the way I look at it is the men say, so the three best words a woman can hear from a man is, I got this. And what I say to the man is, you got this. So that's the feminine empowering the men, saying, you got this. I can do it, but you got it too. You know, so it's really supporting each other in that process of feeling their own power, because that's when it becomes really powerful.
Yeah. I had this thought about feminine power, and if that is a contradiction for you or for feminine.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, feminine usually is not associated with being powerful, right?
Family is not being associated.
Feminine, or at least in a traditional sense, right? It's communal, it's caring, it's connected. It's not driving, it's not individualistic.
Yeah, but I think there lies a lot of power in that. When you're able to come back to the moment and be in community, that's power right there. Because as soon as you're not on your own, you have so much more strength in community, in unity. So I think it really is, it's being portrayed as weak, but I think it actually is the opposite. It's just a different kind of strength.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about dancing, and I wanted to hear, before we close, a little bit more about your work around, with dogs, and how that informs, the whole leadership theme, and what we can learn for human relationships from our relationships with the canines, right? They're called.
Yeah. Well, so as we had mentioned before, one of my things that are really important for me is being seen and heard. And so that really was kind of the, what's it called? The kryptonite
or core wound.
Yeah, the core wound for me. And so I turned that into my strength now. So I have a gift of really seeing and hearing dogs and knowing what they need, because they don't have a voice to speak for themselves. So someone has to help them get heard. So that's what I do. And then I also make sure that the client gets heard and seen, and that the client can express what it needs and expected of the dog. And then I establish the communication between those two pieces. And the goal in that is really that people have the freedom with their dog and with their family to live the life that they want to live. Because so many times people say, oh, I can't, leave the house because I can't leave my dog alone. Well, now that really restricts you in how you can live your life. So how cool would it be if you either can just take your dog with you and he's going to behave, or you can leave your dog at home and he's going to be completely comfortable and you can go out and do your thing. So for me, it's really that freedom and the freedom factor and the easefulness of life. That's what I'm going for. I want life to be easeful.
Yeah.
And my experience of her work, one of the things that really was an aha for me as I saw what she did in the world, was the physical languaging with the dogs, the way that they naturally communicate, and the way in which she could hold that and communicate with the dogs in the way that they understood, like through physicality, because that was their language, and hold the fullness of the dog, like their emotional state and the fact that they're a soul on earth and all of that, at the same time that she recognized this is part of their language, this is part of how they communicate, so I'm going to speak in that, but still hold the rest of the picture. And I feel like that's a really important lesson for us as a collective, as we shy away from, like, I think we've in a large way given away a lot of the benefits of red power. by really just saying, yeah, that's a devolved version. It's very individualistic. It's aggressive. It's the cause of all the ills of the world. And yet, for a lot of her clients, the fact that they see their dog more as a baby than a dog, and they don't want to speak any kind of physical languaging to their dog to tell them these are the boundaries, means they can't have what they want, which is a healthy relationship. And I think that there's a theme that runs throughout of how do we go back and reclaim some of the physicality, some of the aggression, some of that masculine power that we know can go awry, and use it for the benefit inside of a bigger context to do its job and hold space for the emotion and the heart and all the rest of the spectrum. So that's where it's very interesting, where we kind of aha'd one moment. We're like, oh, you help people go reclaim red and physicality for the benefit of having a really heartfelt, emotional, relation to the dog. I'm like, oh, I help men go back and reclaim that red physicality, grounded, rooted power within the context of heart and soul and mind. And that's what actually lets you relax and trust each other and know that there's a structure to the whole thing that you can trust. And that's where all the fun play that we've kind of been talking about can dance in. But if there's so much allergy to that you can't establish that structure, a lot of times our experience is that people are ready for it all, but then it leaks out because of that allergy.
I think what's very important too is that the client needs practical tools, right? So it's always great to talk about these things, but then how do you actually do it? So, my clients were saying, after working with me, they see themselves in a new perspective, and they see their dogs from a new perspective. And then they can translate that into their relationships. The tools that they've learned in the dog training, they say, oh, this actually works in my relationship. The way I communicate, the way I stay open to the information that's coming in. And I think those practical tools really, really make a big difference.
Yeah.
Like wiggling your toes.
Wiggle your toes, yeah.
It's so easy.
It's so funny when I lead meditations, that's always how I start, like wiggle your toes a little bit. I don't know how I came up with that, but it does it for me, that I connect down into my body. So funny to hear that you have the same technique.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So if people feel inspired, Leanna, and they want to work with you or hire you, you are in San Diego, by the way. How can they reach you?
My website is doggydialogue.us.
Doggydialogue.us.
So the best way to remember that's not .com but US is, my slogan is discover the us in dog training.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course on Facebook, Leanna Gregory, they can find me there as well as on Instagram under Doggy Dialogue.
Cool.
Okay, cool. And Jim, how can people reach you?
Absolutely. It's still to come. I'll be launching in the next week or so, but powerwithoutapology.com is where the brotherhood is developing for the good guys to get their power back and win in relation and at work. So I'm excited to have conversations with people. So I'd invite folks to reach out to me on Facebook in the moment. And I'll have in those settings all the links and everything else to check that out. So personally reach out to me on Facebook in the moment. And after that, you're welcome to check out the website. Yeah.
So it's Jim and C like Charlie, Ruzen, right?
Correct. Cruzen for a bruising. Yep.
Cruzen for a bruising. There we go. Great song. Anyway. And Amelia said, I'm wiggling my toes. Everybody wiggle their toes now. And Eric, man full of wisdom, left a long comment that if people watch that afterwards in the WebJam app, they can see it. So I'm not going to read all this, Eric. Please forgive me. I might read it after we close after I let you go.
Okay.
So thank you very much for your friendship and being a role model couple that I can refer to and your support of my work. It's just wonderful to know you, and maybe I move down in your direction and you can teach me to dance and not to be afraid of dogs. So
We welcome it anytime. Come on down.
Or we'll have you dancing with dogs.
And then, not dancing with wolves, but dancing with dogs.
Dancing with dogs.
And this was really inspiring, and it gave me a lot of insight from a practitioner standpoint, which is one reason why I do this, is to connect with people like you and to be inspired. Because there's always the theory, which I know a lot of, and then there is the practice, which is an ongoing process for everybody, I hope, and certainly for me.
Definitely for us.
So thank you very much, and have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. This has been fun.
Bye-bye. Yeah. Bye-bye. So I'm going to read Eric's statement, and obviously if you watch this on YouTube, feel free to check out. So Eric says, the new macho he cleans up after himself. He cleans up the planet. He is a role model for young men. He is rigorously honest and fiercely optimistic. He holds himself accountable. He knows what he feels. He knows how to cry, and he lets it go. He knows how to rage without hurting others. He knows how to fear and how to keep moving. He seeks self-mastery. He has let go of childish shame. He feels guilty when he's done something wrong. He is kind to men, kind to women, kind to children. He teaches others how to be kind. He says he's sorry. He stopped blaming women or his parents or men for his pain years ago. He stopped letting his defenses ruin his relationships. He stopped letting his penis run his life. He knows his body as a loving vessel. He has enough self-respect to tell the truth. He creates intimacy and trust with his actions. He has enough self-respect to tell the honor. He creates intimacy and trust with his actions. He has men that he trusts and that he turns to for support. He knows how to roll with it. He knows how to make it happen. He is disciplined when he needs to be. He is flexible when he needs to be. He knows how to listen from the core of his being. He's not afraid to get dirty. He's ready to confront his own limitations. He has high expectations for himself and for those he connects with. He looks for ways to serve others. He knows he is an individual. He knows that we are all one. He knows he is an animal and a part of nature. He knows his spirit and his connection to something greater. He knows that the future generations are watching his actions. He builds communities where people are respected and valued. He takes responsibility for himself and is also willing to be his brother's keeper. He knows his higher purpose. He loves with fierceness. He laughs with abandon because he gets the joke. And he adds, this is the mature masculine, the new warrior, a redefinition of masculinity for the 21st century. By no means is this list complete. You are welcome to come and add your gifts to this community. It's apparently voted from Boyce & Hodgson's Mankind Project, New England, www.mkpne.org. Thanks for sharing that, Eric. I think that is a very nice summary of what Jim and Leanna shared with us and what they're practicing, and hopefully we will all grow into and practice more and have the opportunity to practice in relationships. So thank you, everyone, if you're still watching, for your interest and your questions and your sharing. And I look forward to have another couple next week on the show, Lion Goodman and his partner. So if you have time next Saturday, join us again at 10 o'clock Pacific time, or 19 hours European Central Time, or 20 hours, 8 p.m. if you happen to be in Turkey like me. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much. I love you all. Bye-bye.